Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions, where the truth hits harder than fiction. It was raining the day she showed up. Not metaphorical rain. Real rain. Relentless, sideways, soaking everything in sight. I was sitting inside a dusty laundromat in a nowhere town with 2 broken dryers and 1 flickering light, watching my only hoodie spin slowly in the wash. I remember thinking I'd kill for a vending machine. Instead, I got her. She stood there, dripping, mascara bleeding into her cheekbones, holding something in her hands. A picture. Of us. One I didn't know existed. I didn't say her name. I didn't ask how she found me. I just stared, too stunned to even breathe. "Emory," she whispered, like she wasn't sure if I was real. "Please, don't run." Too late. I had already run. A year ago. I didn't answer her. I just stared at the photo. It was from our 3rd anniversary. Her laughing, me holding a cake with 1 candle because I forgot to buy more. It was a moment I thought was private, sacred, but now it was ammunition. And the only thing I could think was, who gave this to her? Because the truth is, I didn't just disappear. I erased myself, changed my name, paid cash, left no trail. After what she did, after what I heard that night, I knew I couldn't survive if I stayed. And now she was standing in front of me, soaked to the bone, asking for forgiveness she didn't deserve. But here's the part that'll mess with your head. Her showing up wasn't the most shocking thing that happened that day. It was what came 10 minutes later, when the door opened again. I hadn't spoken a word, not even a breath. I was still trying to process the fact that Blythe had somehow tracked me down to this cracked tile, mildew-scented hole of a laundromat in the middle of nowhere, holding that cursed photo like it proved something. But then the bell above the door jingled again, and everything slowed. He walked in like he owned the place, tall, clean-shaven, buttoned up in a slate-gray coat, the kind that said money without ever saying a word. His eyes locked on her first. Not me. Her. And she flinched. That was the first real moment of clarity I'd had in a year. She flinched like a liar cornered, like a thief caught red-handed. He didn't say anything to her, just handed her a dry folder, nodded once at me, then turned and walked back out into the storm. She didn't chase him. She didn't cry. She just stood there, clutching the folder now instead of the photo. And for the first time since I'd met her, Blythe looked genuinely scared. "What's in that?" I asked, my voice sounding like it came from someone else. She didn't answer. She just sat down across from me like we were 2 strangers waiting for a delayed train, and finally whispered, "I didn't know he'd come here too." I swear. I didn't believe her. Not anymore. I had believed too much, for too long. When she said the late-night meetings were client-related, when she claimed the locked phone was just a privacy thing, when she kissed me goodnight while another man's scent clung to her skin. But now, here we were again, with secrets unspoken and that damn folder between us. She slid it toward me slowly, like it might bite. I opened it, and my hands started shaking. Inside wasn't what I expected. No love letters, no photos, no confessions. Just 1 printed document. A medical record. Lab results. My name. A diagnosis date. And a highlighted line that made my throat close. Patient unaware. She had known. For a year. And never told me. The paper felt heavier than it should have. I stared at that line. Patient unaware. Like it was in another language. Like maybe if I blinked hard enough, it would vanish or rewrite itself into something less horrifying. But it didn't. It stayed right there, highlighted in yellow like some kind of cruel spotlight. I was apparently diagnosed with a hereditary heart condition 10 months ago. 10 months ago. I had never seen a doctor about this. I never received results. I never even suspected anything was wrong. But she had. And somehow, the lab had mistakenly sent the report to her email instead of mine. I don't know what stunned me more, the diagnosis or the fact that she had known and said nothing. Not when I collapsed on the porch last winter and blamed it on dehydration. Not when I started waking up short of breath. She'd look me in the eye every day and asked if I wanted another slice of pizza while pretending everything was fine. When I finally looked up, she had her head in her hands, rocking slightly, mumbling to herself like a broken record. "I didn't want to scare you. I thought if I pretended it wasn't real, it wouldn't be real." That's what she said. Like I was some child who couldn't handle the truth. Like I hadn't already been handling her lies for years. I asked her what the man from earlier had to do with this, and she just shook her head, trembling. "He used to be my therapist. I called him when you left. I didn't know he still had the results. He said he'd never breach your privacy. But I guess he changed his mind. Something inside me snapped then, not in an angry, explosive way. Quiet. Cold. The kind of break that doesn't make noise until it's far too late to fix. I stood up, walked outside into the rain without my hoodie. She followed me, barefoot, calling my name over and over like it still meant something. But I kept walking, because that was the moment I realized I hadn't just disappeared to escape her cheating. I disappeared to save my life. And she almost took it anyway, just slower. I didn't have a destination. I walked until the rain soaked through my shoes and the sky turned from gray to black, not caring who saw me or what street I ended up on. Every step away from that laundromat felt like peeling off a layer of skin that had been rotting under the surface for years. I thought about the medical report clutched in my back pocket, still damp from her hands. Thought about all the moments she kissed me while knowing I was slowly dying. But the worst thought, the one I couldn't shake, was that maybe she had planned it that way. I know how that sounds. Paranoid. Delusional. But when you've been gaslit for so long, doubt becomes a reflex. Everything she ever did suddenly looked different. The vitamin bottles she insisted I stop taking. The way she made me skip that follow-up appointment because they always find something to worry about. The mornings she acted annoyed when I complained about my chest tightening. All of it, like puzzle pieces I never knew I was holding. And now, with her just showing up out of nowhere, finding me after a year of silence, bringing the past with her like some ghost she couldn't shake, it didn't feel like love. It felt like strategy. I ended up in a bus station restroom, staring at my reflection under flickering lights. I looked like a shell, pale, hollow-eyed, lips cracked from the cold. I didn't recognize the man in the mirror, but I recognized the fear. And that terrified me more than anything. Because if she could find me once, she could find me again. And if I didn't start fighting back, not physically, but intelligently, I was going to fade out of existence before I ever had the chance to live. I needed answers. Proof. A timeline. Not just about the affair, but about what she knew and when. I had stayed silent too long. So I made a decision. I used the last of my cash to buy a burner phone. I was done hiding. If she wanted a reunion, she was going to get one. But this time, I'd be asking the questions. And she wouldn't like any of them. The burner phone felt cheap in my hand, like it might shatter if I gripped it too hard, but it gave me something I hadn't felt in months: leverage. I sat on a plastic bench in that empty station and stared at the cracked screen, debating whether to call her or not. In the end, I didn't have to. She called me. She knew I'd buy a phone. Knew I'd be too curious to walk away without digging deeper. "You're angry," she said as soon as I answered. Her voice was too calm, too controlled. I didn't respond. "I deserve that," she added quickly, then whispered. "But I also deserve to tell you the truth." I gave her one shot. One question. How long were you planning to keep me in the dark about the diagnosis? Her silence wasn't shocked. It was calculated. Then she said something that changed the way I remembered everything. "I wasn't going to tell you. Not unless you left me first." The words felt like a punch. She didn't stutter. She didn't cry. She just said it, like it was a strategy that had made perfect sense at the time. "I didn't want you to leave and use it as an excuse to disappear. You always run from pain, Emory. Always have." That's when I realized she'd rewritten our whole marriage in her head. In her version, I was weak. I was dramatic. I was the one who needed protection, not from the illness, but from reality itself. She believed her betrayal had been necessary, even merciful. I asked her if the affair had anything to do with it. She laughed, and the sound made my skin crawl. "No, that was separate," she said, like she was untangling wires. "You were already slipping away before him. I just moved on faster." That was the moment something inside me snapped. Not from heartbreak. I'd already mourned what we were. It was clarity. Pure, sharp, undeniable clarity. She had rewritten the story to make herself the hero. But I had lived it. And now, I was ready to reclaim every page. After that call, I didn't sleep. I just sat on the floor of a motel room with cigarette burns in the carpet, watching the second hand on the clock twitch forward while my thoughts spiraled in 1,000 directions. She had said the affair was separate, like it belonged in a sealed box that had nothing to do with the way she treated me. But I couldn't stop thinking about how fast she said it, how quickly she tried to make it small. That's when I knew I had to find the man, the one she moved on with. I didn't want revenge, I wanted information. If I had been so blind for so long, maybe he could tell me what I hadn't seen. So I dug. I searched old voicemails she left on our shared cloud account, the one she probably forgot we had. I looked through metadata on photos she'd posted before I left. Eventually, I found it. A gym tag in the corner of a mirror selfie, dated 3 weeks before our anniversary. A location I recognized. I remembered how she came home that day with sore legs and said her new instructor was killing her in the best way. The man's name was Destry, who names their kid Destry. Anyway, I walked into that gym the next day, not to confront him, just to see him, to understand what made her throw away everything for someone who looked like a walking protein bar. He didn't recognize me, of course, but I recognized the tone in his voice when he flirted with the receptionist, the same low charm he probably used on Blythe. It wasn't personal. It was performance. I left without speaking to him, but the weight in my chest didn't ease. Back at the motel, I opened my laptop and checked something I hadn't dared to before, her email. I still had the password, she hadn't changed it. And sitting right there, unopened, was a recent thread labeled Urgent, Final Results. The sender wasn't a doctor. It was a law firm. I clicked, and my blood ran cold. The file was a pending claim. Not for me, for her. And the reason? Malpractice related to withheld medical information and wrongful death. She was preparing a case, but not for me to win. For her. In case I didn't survive. I didn't even realize I'd stopped breathing until the motel room started spinning. I read the file again and again, hoping I was misunderstanding something, that it was old, maybe a mistake, something unrelated. But every word confirmed the truth. She had already hired an attorney. The case was real. The payout was real. And the part that destroyed what little was left of me, the date. The paperwork had been initiated 6 months before I found out about the diagnosis, meaning she wasn't reacting to my disappearance. She was preparing for my death while I was still lying next to her in bed. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe hours. Maybe the whole night. At one point, I started laughing. Not because it was funny, but because I had reached a level of disbelief that broke something in me. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about survival. She hadn't just lied. She had monetized the risk of my silence. I started pacing, thinking through every memory like a detective reviewing evidence from a crime he didn't know he was the victim of. The supplements she threw away. The accidental skipped checkups. The time she told my mother I was probably just tired from work after I collapsed at Thanksgiving. And I believed her. I let her control the narrative. I gave her the benefit of the doubt, over and over again, while she was building a legal safety net in case I flatlined. That's not love. That's strategy. Cold. Surgical. Ruthless. I sent the file to myself. Then I printed it at a gas station kiosk, folded it into an envelope, and wrote 3 words on the front in shaky black ink. In case I vanish. I mailed it to my brother, with no return address. He and I hadn't spoken in years, not since the fallout over the inheritance, but he was still blood. If something happened to me now, someone had to know. I didn't care about justice. I just wanted to make sure she couldn't bury the truth along with me. When I walked out of the station, the world felt colder than it had in days. And for the first time since I disappeared, I was ready to face her. Not to make peace, but to pull everything out into the light and see what she did when there was nowhere left to hide. I met her at a diner just outside the city, one of those places that still smelled like cigarette smoke from decades ago. She sat in the corner booth, waiting, her hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. When I slid into the seat across from her, she looked up like she was staring at a ghost, and in some ways, maybe she was. The version of me she used to know, the one who flinched at confrontation and swallowed pain like medicine, that man was gone. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I just placed the printed copy of the legal claim on the table and let it speak for itself. Her face drained of color. For once, she didn't have a lie ready. Just silence. And that was all I needed. I'm not here for revenge, I told her. I'm here for the truth. And after that, I never want to see you again. She tried to explain. Of course she did. Words like fear, confusion, depression, all the usual tools manipulators use to decorate their decisions. But I didn't care. My healing wasn't going to come from her apology. It was going to come from reclaiming my story. I stood up, thanked her for showing me exactly who she was, and walked out. Not in rage, but in something stronger, peace. That was 6 months ago. I live in a small town now, where people know your name and wave from their porches. I work at a mechanic's shop and fix things with my hands, which feels good after years of being invisible behind a screen. The diagnosis? Real, but manageable. I changed my habits, stayed consistent with checkups, and the new doctor said my prognosis is solid. I even started volunteering at a youth center, helping kids who grew up learning that silence was safer than speaking up. Sometimes, people ask if I miss her. But I don't miss someone who mourned my absence only when it threatened her comfort. I don't regret disappearing. I regret waiting so long to do it. And now, I'm building something new, not to prove her wrong, but to prove to myself that I was never weak for leaving. I was finally strong enough to choose me. Thank you for watching this emotional journey on Reddit Confessions. If you made it this far, tell us in the comments. What's one real historical event where someone walked away and came back stronger? We'd love to hear your take. And as always, stay subscribed for more powerful true stories, because sometimes the biggest plot twists are the ones we live through.